Dhamma greetings, friends. My name is Joe, and I'm a student of Bhante Candana. Bhante is currently a homeless monk, and he's not attached to any monastic organization. And he's traveling from places to places, country to country, to spread the Dhamma. So if you do find his teachings and his videos helpful, please consider donating at the link below. And I hope you have a good day and hope you enjoy the video. Thank you.
This path requires work. It requires audacity. It requires fortitude. It definitely requires, if not demands, that we break the molds, the boundaries of yesterday. Whatever we saw us to be basically the results of, the outcome of, to break through all that, it requires every day that we carve our way out of ignorance. It's definitely not something that we can rely on yesterday's accomplishments, yesterday's, what worked yesterday. It's not stale. The Dhamma is not stale. It's always fresh. It's always ongoing. Hence, our efforts have to be fresh. They have to be ongoing. Daily, daily, daily. Breaking those things that we keep building for ourselves, trying to find a fixed, concretized, defined, substantiated, if you will, version of reality and try to nail it into a frame and hang it and say, yes, this is the Dhamma. Yes, this is my life. This is the path of practice, and my experience yesterday validated that, and what I'm saying now is dependent on that. That's never the Dhamma, because that is stale, and the Dhamma is not stale. It's not yesterday's fare, because it requires us to look at our living continuum, this process called life, this continuity of nama rupa, nama rupa, nama rupa. Form, name, which is just another way of saying a bunch of things. When we say names, just to simplify things, be it feelings, be it perceptions, be it the intention we give to things, towards things, the attention that we give to the contact that is happening all the time. But then we look down and we see this body and we say, aha, this is real. This is undeniably there. This is substantial. This is real. This is something I can find as validation, concretization. this collection of rupa, or the four primaries, is all the groundedness I need to establish myself in this very solid entity called myself. But that's not Dhamma. And no, you cannot go around persuading yourself that because you know some principles of the Dhamma, that, or say you have some experiences in meditation as well, or you're practicing some sila, that you are on the path. Well, you're not on the path so long as you're looking at this body and considering it as substantially there. So long as we're looking at the feelings and saying, this is substantially mine. So all those theories, concepts, ideas, principles, so-called experiences, go out the window. Because you're simply leaning on what you thought about the Dhamma, yesterday's fair, as I was mentioning. That's not fresh. Therefore, it's not Dhamma. That's why Lord Buddha constantly nailed it into people's heads, just to shock them into reality, into understanding that the Dhamma cannot be confined into their ideas about the Dhamma. So today, as you are continuing to sit, listening to these words, where we will be exploring from this time from the Sangyutta Nikaya, the connected discourses, Sutta number 22.100. Sutta number 22.100. It comes from the Khandavagga, which is the collection of discourses, connected discourses that deal with the aggregates, the 5 aggregates. And from a collection of discourses that are called Pupphavagga, which are the group of suttas that, with the title Puppha, means, in this case, flowers. And the sutta's name is Dutiya Gaddulabhaddha Sutta. So I chose this sutta because it is, here too, Lord Buddha is discussing, using a simile. The previous sutta to this, and by the way, in English, I translated it as, or it's usually translated as the leash. Leash that you put on your pet, or especially a dog, or a wild animal, let's say. But here it is the second, or part 2. The first one also, the one preceding this, is leash, the leash part 1. In it, Lord Buddha has even more similes, but I found this sutta to be particularly relevant to us today. And here we're going to see how Lord Buddha even uses a phenomenon that was apparently available even at the time of Lord Buddha, and which we'll see in a few minutes. That is also very much, contemporary of us, of ours today, specifically in the realm of movies or animations. How Lord Buddha is comparing it at one point to the mind, because it is so fast. Because earlier I was mentioning how we take this body and consider it as substantial. Why? Because it is so much like it's right there. It for all intents and purposes, it looks undeniably there. It cannot be debated. It's there. It's tangible. But so are our concepts. So are our sannyas. perceptions, in this case specifically our memories, which we primarily lean on to construct this thing called life of ours. Identification, what is that? The identity, the sense of identity of who I am. What am I relying on when I say I am? This is my self. I must be relying on something, impressions, fragments of a past or fragments of life experiences. It's like somebody walking into a bank and saying, I have an account here. I have, let's say, stacks of dollars or a currency here in the vault inside your bank institution. So it's very, very similar to that in a way. That myself, think of it as your bank account, but your living experiences, actually having lived experiences, and that's not even, one might argue that that's not even an accurate depiction because they were never lived. Every single moment that we live, so long as it is tinged, sullied by the identification of a self, myself, and you over there, I have this thing here and you have that thing over there, mentality, it forbids me from living, from truly being present, which is what Lord Buddha talks about when he says, when seeing, just see. When hearing something with your ears, are you hearing it? Or are you lost with the details, specifics, the sound, its nuances, what the sound is saying to you? What is it? How is it related to you? Is it to you, addressed to you? Is it reminiscent of something? Similarly with the other senses and the mind. Every thought that we have, every mind object that runs through the mind, every Dhamma in that sense, small case, small d, Dhamma, every phenomenon that goes and runs through the mind, how much weight does that have for you in pulling you this way or in that, pulling you away from the living experience, tinged by associations of memories, experiences of the past? Nevertheless, we look at those and say, that's part of me, that's my personality. Hence, those are my currencies that I am holding inside this bank account, which for convention's sake, I will go ahead and call it myself. This is me. But the attitude is the most dangerous part. It's not us saying, because we sometimes see individuals who have studied, let's say, somewhat the Dhamma, and especially in this context, the Paticcasamuppada, or where we discuss causation, like we discussed for a few weeks in recently the Mahanidana Sutta, causation. So a person might be quite knowledgeable or having read on it, so they start to abstain from using the word myself, even in their correspondences, or try to avoid saying it, but they nevertheless live it, live what that connotes, that means for them. The identification with the five khandhas. That identification is the very glue that keeps us hovering, that keeps us stuck in samsara, which Lord Buddha tried his very, very best for 45 years to help us disentangle from. So please approach this sutta with the understanding that there is some work for us to do here. You have come here, you are listening to the suttas every week. You could be doing something else, but you are here. That's the first step, but that's a huge step. You have come to this life, to this body, not to be doing what you do. That's it. No, there's something else that the Dhamma has attracted you for. There's something else that's pulling you towards the Dhamma. That is what I am encouraging you not to belittle, not to minimize, not to say, well, it's a thing. It's, I'm just gravitating towards because I like it. No, it's far more than that. Otherwise, you could have been doing golf today or some other thing. You're here. So please give yourself that credit as well, that acknowledgement when we go over this sutta. So the Leash, part 2, Dutiya Gaddulabhaddha Sutta, from the Sangyutta Nikaya, Khandavagga Sangyutta. So let's begin. Bhikkhus, this sangsara is beginningless, without any discernible start to it, for one to designate or identify as its point of origin. Similarly, there is no discernible point of origin or some means of pointing out how far back it goes, whereby beings, blinded by their ignorance and shackled by craving in their hearts, began wandering in their cyclical rebirths and deaths, loitering around from life to life within the vastness of samsara. People like to go and look for the beginning. And in the beginning, it's interesting, everybody says in the beginning this is what happened, but apparently there's some cast of characters there at the beginning. Apparently that's not the beginning. Something must have been going on. Where did these guys show up from? Who wrote that in the beginning? So it's quite childish to go around looking for that beginning, as well as looking for that finish point in somehow in the future, that everything will end. Of course, when we think about, for example, the Rohitassa Sutta, where Lord Buddha is speaking to this Deva about the end of the world, the end of the world. Where is the end of the world? And he says, there's no way that you're going to find the end of the world. Lord Buddha's answer to him. And he says, yes, Bhante, you are correct, because I have looked and looked and looked with my psychic abilities in the past life. I traveled for 100 years straight, non-stop, only resting for food and going to the bathroom and resting a little bit. And every day I would travel to reach the end of the world, but I never got to the end of the world. And after 100 years, I dropped dead and I couldn't reach the end of the world. So you are correct, Blessed One, he says. But Lord Buddha adds a caveat and he says, but I will tell you that you will not reach the end of the world so long as you have not reached the end of craving. In essence, you will reach the end of the world when you have reached the end of craving, which startles the person. What does that mean? Yes. This is the fathom-long body, Lord Buddha says. That's where you will find everything. And that's all we need. We don't need much. We don't need to go and ask astronomers or some evolutionary biologists or anthropologists to figure out for us when the beginning was, or when the end will be. Because Lord Buddha here says, beings blinded by their ignorance and shackled by their craving in their hearts began wandering and continue on wandering non-stop. In the previous sutta, which is Leash, Patama Gaddulabhaddha Sutta, the Leash Part 1, in it, Lord Buddha also adds that the world will end, the oceans will dry up. There's not going to be a single drop of water found within the deepest of the oceans. Yet, he says, beings will continue on roaming through sangsara. That means that through the 31 layers of existence, they will continuously keep being born, because that is how powerful the person's craving is, the tenacity that we have, we hold with, and be shackled by the ignorance in our hearts. It doesn't matter how many Himalayan mountain ranges will melt away, how many galaxies will come and go. That being will continue on. That's another definition of sangsara. So the person is lounging. Think of it like that. They're lounging like a chaise longue. So the person is lounging and is like hovering and sleeping away and drifting through endless time, so long as they are not coming to the Dhamma to put an end to all that mess. And here Lord Buddha continues. Imagine, bhikkhus, there was a dog tied up on a leash, which was secured to a sturdy post or pillar. Now, whatever that dog did, whether getting up or standing, lying down, walking around, or sitting, it would be stuck there, unable to walk beyond the limits of that post or pillar, tied to it. Now, whatever the dog may do, whether he gets up or stands, it would have no other choice but to stand close to that post or pillar. If it were to sit down, it would have no other choice but to sit down close to that post or pillar. If it were to take a few steps and start walking, it would have no other choice but to walk as far as his leash would allow him to, while being securely tied to that post or pillar. And if it were to lie down, it would have no other choice but to lie down close to that post or pillar. In just the same way, bhikkhus, when the unlearned in the Dhamma, the Putujjana, looks upon material form, he sees it and relates to it as, this is mine. This is who I am. This is my self. Also, when he looks upon feeling, he sees it and relates to it as, this is mine. This is who I am. This is my self. You can just check quick reference to yourself and see when you're having feelings, is that your relationship with them, with those feelings, when they arise? But you have to be quick. Your sati has to be quick enough to see the texture of that feeling, the attachment, the leash. The leash. There's a reason why Lord Buddha is using these beautiful similes. They need to be seen as extremely relevant to our condition, our presence in ignorance, so long as we're not arahants yet. So when the feeling happens, is it purely a feeling or is it my feeling? That's why I can't get rid of it. I don't like this feeling. Hello, already it's screaming at you that this is personal. The feeling is personal. Similarly with form. It could be a thing, it could be your body. It's not just your body. When we see in the aggregates being referred to as rupa, it could be a thing to which your body is responding to, reacting to. You bang your knee against some surface. You have a position towards that surface. That's a form. Even a sound is a form in a way, you can think of it. Or a sight to which you reacted with the eyes, part of the body. So it's not just the eye, it's the thing to which the eye was behaving in a certain way, picked up some information. Hence, you had the eye consciousness, which was registered in the mind, and now you have a position towards it. Why? Because contact was made. Because of contact, boom, 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 what? We have feeling, obviously, but then from feeling, what do we have? Craving showed up. So each of these gets the stamp of approval of atta, myself. Asmimana, this is me. The contact was me, the feeling is me, the craving is me, the salayatana is me, the six senses are me, and obviously that means namarupa is me. There you go. That's my living experience. That's usually how fast it works, because there's no sati to see what's happening. Also, when he looks upon perception, he sees it and relates to it as, this is mine, this is who I am, this is myself. Perception is the big one. Sanya. It's double agent. It's evil number one. FBI's most wanted. It's the most insidious part of nama rupa, you can think of, or nama specifically. It's like a screen that comes and blocks reality, perception. Because of it, we have moha, different versions of moha. Remember, in the Dhammapada, Lord Buddha, actually no, in the Sutta Nipata, Magandiya Sutta, where Lord Buddha is discussing, explaining this to Magandiya and his wife, he says, Sanya virattasya nisanti gantha. For the person who has detached himself from perceptions or sanyas, they no longer are reliable, is a reliable source of truth, of knowledge, of reality. For such a person, there cannot be any delusions, plural, moha. And then he continues in the verse, he says, Panya vimuttasa nasanti moha. I'm sorry, the first one is gantha. Sanya virattasa nasanti gantha. There cannot be any bonds, shackles, plural again. And for the person who has released himself, freed himself, liberated himself through wisdom, panya vimuttasa nasanti moha, there cannot be any delusions. It's big. So when we are doing sati, it's not just mindfulness practice. It's trying to figure out, understand, probe, in order for us to discern and gain the wisdom to release ourselves. So it's never a passive affair. Why? Because you're going after the, as they say vernacularly, the big guns. We're going after the aggregates, the real secret agents of Mara. Also, when he looks upon habitual drives, sankharas, he sees them and relates to them as, these are mine, these are who I am, these are myself. Sankharas are just like the rest of them, not what they appear to be, but they're very compelling. It's like an avalanche that's coming down. You look, you probe, you look into it, and you see nothing but just snow. But it's compacted. It's being compacted because for generations of lives coming and going, because of the repetition of certain tendencies, they become a forceful or formidable, I would say, underlying presence It doesn't matter if it's a wholesome or unwholesome sankhara. They are sankharas. They need to be understood, put to the side, and done with. That's what an arahant has done. Otherwise, they will drag us continuously, like an avalanche pulling you with it. And when he looks upon consciousness, he sees it and relates to it as, this is mine, this is who I am, this is myself. As a result, whenever he is active or walking, he is active, or this is referring back to the Putujjana. Putujjana are basically a majority of beings, not just humans, but in this case, specifically humans, or primarily humans, who are unlearned in the Dhamma. That doesn't mean people who've never heard of the Dhamma. No, you might have a PhD in the Dhamma. You might be in robes for 60 years. It means nothing. You could be very much of a card-carrying member of the Putujjana club. So, all Putujjanas. As a result, whenever he is active or walking, he is active or walking, but while being closely tied down to those five aggregates, grabbing and holding on to those five aggregates. There's a term in Pali, Pancha Upadana Khanda. Pancha means five. Khanda means obviously the aggregates. Upadana is the troublemaker. That's the thing which we're trying to pull away from, because so long as we're alive, we need the five aggregates. We need the five aggregates to survive, to live. Otherwise, they will come apart. Because it's the glue that keeps the aggregates together. It has started with the craving to exist. But what if you don't have that craving, like in the case of an arahant? It's coming apart. Hence, the disgust becomes exceedingly exponential. Disgust of everything. It's not just disenchantment. Nibbida is heavier. There's a repugnance attached to it. There's a presence of, it's like, again? So that's the opposite of the glue that is craving, that was holding the five aggregates together. So that's why it's called saupadisesa. Saupadisesa in terms of the nirodha, the cessation of the person, meaning the arahant, with residues remaining, saupadisesa, and anupadisesa, which is without residues remaining, meaning that the person has just died, the arahant, nowhere to be found, not even by If he were to get up or stand, he would get up or stand, but while being closely tied down to those aggregates, grabbing or holding on to those five aggregates. If he were to sit down, or he would sit down, but while being closely tied down to those five aggregates, grabbing and holding on to those five aggregates. And if he were to lie down, he would lie down, but while being closely tied down to those five aggregates, grabbing and holding on to those five aggregates. So this is not the dog Lord Buddha is talking about. The leash, the story of the dog is over. The simile, this is now, he's talking about the Putujjana. When he goes to sleep, he wakes up in the middle of the night or in the morning, he has to carry over yesterday's story of who he is, or he was, or he thought he was. When he's standing up to go to the bathroom or to go and do something else, he must carry his sense of identification with him to make sense of his life. Why? Because he's not living what is happening. He is not seeing simply for seeing's sake. He is not doing what Bahya was able to do. Mute mutamattang. By sensing, you're just sensing, whether it's the tongue, whether it's the body, whether it's the nose. It's just smelling. It's just tasting. It's just touching. No, the person is, because of the upadana khanda, He's carrying the aggregates with him. He doesn't know what else to do. It's too scary, the concept of not being the amalgamation or the collection of the aggregates, which he has labeled myself. That's the putujjana in a nutshell. Therefore, because it is very important for you to reflect upon the quality of your heart, checking to see if your heart is truly defiled while you identify. It is in fact true that for a long time now, my heart has indeed been overwhelmed and saturated by passions and lust, by anger and hatred, and by delusion, lobha, dosa, moha, the three defilements. After all, because it is allowing the heart to become corrupted and defiled, which causes beings to become corrupted and defiled. But it is with the cleansing and purifying of the heart that beings become cleansed and purified. See, you've heard me and probably others mention how Lord Buddha taught two things. Essentially, one thing, suffering, but he also taught its cure. So initially he says, it is allowing the heart to become corrupted and defiled, which causes beings to become corrupted and defiled. That's the suffering part. That's the painful part. And here he's giving the antidote to it. It is with the cleansing and purifying of the heart that beings become cleansed and purified. Purified of what? He just mentioned it above. Lobha, dosa, moha. Corruptions of passions and lust and greed. Corruptions of hatred and anger, resentment. Corruptions of delusion. Those three. So this is where I was referring to earlier. You'll see the animation part, but Lord Buddha is going to ask a question. Bhikkhus, have you seen the display called the Moving Picture Show? Yes, Bhante, the bhikkhus replied. And the Blessed One said this. Now, bhikkhus, that moving picture show, being quite fast, displaying different images at such a rapid pace, is still something that was created and designed by the mind itself. This was interesting because years ago I used to study animation. And they had brought or showed us images, old images of one of the first mechanisms that they had for animation. It's called zoetrope. There's a few versions that they did in the 1800s. But it's interesting because Lord Buddha is talking about a phenomena, a mechanism that was called charana. Now, unfortunately, most translators use charana as some form of conduct or conduct related, and they completely miss the picture, pun intended here, I guess. But it's interesting because the connection that Lord Buddha is making is quite obvious. We know today, anybody who's studying even very basics of animation or motion picture, they know that, and I've mentioned this many, many times, the eye will not catch still images if you show them at a rapid pace when it is at 24 frames per second. That means 24 separate images are run through in front of the eyes, but squeezed together into the time span of 1 second. So if you slow it down any less than 24 frames a second, then the eye will catch it. It will no longer seem like it's a moving picture show. It's not a movie. You're going to say there's a gap here. It's called strobing, by the way. The eye will catch that. But the perfect sweet spot, it could go faster than 24, of course, but 24 is the best speed. So in those days, I don't know if it was 24 frames, but at the time of Lord Buddha, we're talking 2,600 years ago. But in those days, what they would have is a screen, and they would show this primarily in a dark place, like a tent or at night. And so they would have a white screen, perhaps white or light colored, and in the back they would have a torch or a light source. And between the light and the white screen, which the people would see from the opposite side, the audience would see as they would be seated, and they would look at the screen. So in between the screen, the back of it, and the light, there would be the circular structure that would have separate carvings made out of wood usually. So think of them as different panels. So it's a big circle. So it would run, but the screen, the curtain, would only show one of those panels at a time. So it would show it like as moving. So here we have the earliest form of a zoetrope, earliest form of an animation. So it's interesting for me to come across this sutta, and I was like, wow, and I was led to it by Bhante Nyanananda, by the way, because he refers to this, and he correctly translated it, of course, as a moving picture show. So Lord Buddha is now referring to this and saying that it displays many different images, but that also is created and designed by the mind itself, despite the fact that it moves so fast. However, he says, Lord Buddha continues, when comparing the range of multiplicity of images displayed by the moving picture show to those constructed and paraded by the mind itself, there can be no contest. The speed at which your thoughts, specifically your sannyas, are rolling along, it's inconceivable when we try to compare it to the speed of that moving picture show. For the mind is far superior to it by any and all measures, being so much more widely diverse in its displays and far quicker than that moving picture show. Next time you're doing dynamic meditation in the form of walking meditation, when you're observing every single step that you're taking and the steps involved in each step, lifting, raising, pushing forward, deciding to bring it down, touching, placing, resting, and now the other side, leaning forward, obviously, the body. See how fast this is moving. But in the meantime, see how fast the mind is coming up with different images, different sannyas, different impressions. It sees one thing, all of a sudden it's starting to make associations with so many other things. And then you all of a sudden catch yourself and you've advanced 3 or 4 meters already, and you completely did that without any mindfulness. There was complete asati, not sati. Where did it go? Because the mind is so fast. It's mesmerizing. Just like those people who are sitting there to watch the moving picture show, they're mesmerized by the story that they are constructing based on what they're seeing on that screen. Me, myself, this is all who I am. The impressions are simply impressions. Somebody has to breathe life into them. That's where our delusion comes in. We facilitate the story. We make it believable. Otherwise, it's just lights and shadows. Therefore, because it is very important for you to reflect upon the quality of your heart, checking to see if your heart is truly defiled. While you identify, it is in fact true that for a long time now, my heart has indeed been overwhelmed and saturated by passions and lust, by anger and hatred, and by delusion. For bhikkhus, it is allowing the heart to become corrupted and defiled, which causes beings to become corrupted and defiled. But it is with the cleansing and purifying of the heart that beings become cleansed and purified. So he's repeating here what he said earlier also. And this in the context of trying to find a beginning point of sangsara, or a beginning point of life as such, existence as such. Planets come and go, but the ignorance, so long as it is maintained, beings are going to keep going through samsara, keep headed towards the slaughterhouse. Again and again, birth and death, womb after womb after womb after womb. Bhikkhus, I have not seen any ornately rich class of living beings as diverse as those seen within the animal realm. Now, bhikkhus, although the animal realm is so richly diverse, as it displays so many varieties of animals in their characteristics, nevertheless, it is still something that was created and designed by the mind itself. Thus, when comparing the range of multiplicity displayed among the animal realm to those constructed and paraded by the mind itself, there can be no contest. For the mind is far superior to it by any and all measures, being so much more widely diverse in its displays and ornately rich. If you watch a nature show, you see how diverse animals are. They always are discovering. I think when I used to teach biology, the estimates were that there would be over 100 to 150 different species of insects discovered daily in the Amazon forest. Daily. New species of insects. 100 plus. But still, Lord Buddha is saying that's nothing compared to the images, the things we tell ourselves. That's why commitments are so hard. That's why you need to every day practice with diligence and not rely on yesterday's successes or deem yourself as a failure because of yesterday's failures, let's say. You have to get up. You always have to get up and push forward because you're working against a formidable enemy, the mind. The mind. We need to tame it. We need to make it pliable. In the book of the twos, I believe, of the Anguttara Nikaya, numerical discourses, Lord Buddha says, I have not seen anything as pliable as the mind, as malleable as the mind, bhikkhus. But at the same time, he also gives the opposite image of a mind that is so rigid, the mind of a putujjana. Therefore, bhikkhus, it is very important for you to reflect upon the quality of your heart, checking to see if your heart is truly defiled while you identify. It is in fact true that for a long time now, my heart has indeed been overwhelmed and saturated by passions and lust, by anger and hatred, and by delusion. For bhikkhus, it is allowing the heart to become corrupted and defiled, which causes beings to become corrupted and defiled. Allowing the heart to become. Here, the word is chitta, by the way. Some translators use the word mind, mano, basically. But in this case, it's the heart. You have to understand the importance of trust, hence the need for me to use heart instead of mind. Because there's this misconception that it's all a matter of adding more information, so-called understanding, comprehension. And somehow that will lead you to Nibbana. That's not the case. That's not the case. Lord Buddha used chitta in different forms, in different ways, depending on the context. But it's not something to be looked down upon like some teachers or scholars or translators have used it to be, to present it as. That's not true. And today's culture is very much at extremes without having understood the meaning of the word chitta. So we need to watch to see, and we have to be very honest about this, to see whether the heart at that moment is corrupted or not. And if it is, fine, see it. Is it defiled? Okay, see it, but you have to turn it into from akusala to kusala, but you cannot look at it as kusala when it is akusala, when it is unskillful. You can't claim it to be wholesome or skillful. That's lying to yourself. And there's a lot of people who are doing that, claiming that they're on the path. They have nothing to do with the path. Because honesty is number one. No one can know your heart as well as you. And a Buddha, of course, but we don't have one. We have you. Can you do the job of Lord Buddha? I think you can in this case. You can look at your heart. You can at least say, yes, it is cleansed, or no, it is not. I still have within me anger. I still have within me lust. Okay, there's nothing wrong with that when you see it, acknowledge it, and then remove it. Cleanse the heart, Lord Buddha says. Imagine, bhikkhus, there was an artist or a painter working with various paints and dyes. As he goes on painting on a smooth wall or a heavy canvas, using such colors as rusty red, vermilion, yellow, or some indigo shade. He does this while creating the figure of a man or a woman with all their features and reliefs down to the last detail. In just the same way, bhikkhus, when the unlearned person in the Dhamma, the Putujjana, is working on creating a new life for himself in the future, whatever he produces or fabricates will result in material form, remaining confined to it. Here is where we can actually tie it in with what we mentioned in what we saw in the Mahanidana Sutta a few weeks ago, when Lord Buddha is saying the consciousness, when it's landing, Namarupa will join it, and then you have the embryo, then you have the actual being. That's when the gestation period begins. So here, Lord Buddha is adding a layer to that by explaining to us exactly some of the mechanics, because he's using the example of the painter. Just like the person is adding those, colors, whether it's red, blue, yellow, turmeric, and he's doing the outlines, he's all of a sudden from a blank space, you create figures, you see images of a man or a woman. Similar to that, the Putujjana, every time he is thinking about form, has a relationship with form, rupa, he is producing it, he is fabricating it, because the person is on the leash. Remember? He's confined to it. He does not see himself beyond the confines of rupa. Also, whatever he produces or fabricates will result in feeling, remaining confined to it. He doesn't know anything else. Feeling. If you remove feeling, he doesn't know what to do. To this day, people, where was I? A month ago or so, I was in a place, and we were having, I think, tea or coffee or something, and then this woman looked at me and said, "So you don't get married as a monk?" And I said, "Yes." And she said, "That's wrong." And I said, "I'm sorry?" She said, "That's wrong. Like, we all have the duty." Just like that, passionately, she was like, "We have the duty as men and women to procreate. You have to have," like, she was upset that I was living a celibate life. I am living a celibate life. And she was like, but that, so she was trying to convince me that is the norm. And what I am proposing with my existence here as a bhikkhu is something quite abnormal, unacceptable, in fact. So I tried speaking to her, like, try some finesse and logic and rationale. No, people want to see life only in terms of the presence of passions. You remove passions. You remove, for example, lust. Then something's wrong with the picture. This is not a full life. You have to be passionate. I've seen people over the years say, you have to have passion. And it's like they're drooling almost. And for some reason, they also use their hands like, like this. In their mind, that's the putujana. In their mind, feelings, the spectrum of feelings, especially the extremes, the intense, hot feelings, are very much part and parcel of life. Meanwhile, the Dhamma is saying, no, leave that all behind. That's why you've been stuck in samsara. So you see how the majority of beings are stuck in samsara, and there's no way that they will be leaving it anytime soon. That includes even the Brahma gods, even the highest of devas. And that's why the Dhamma is so rare. It's so valuable. It needs to be protected by each and every one in their hearts. Even the little Dhamma that a person has come across, they need to preserve it, practice it, taste it daily, daily, daily. Also, whatever he produces or fabricates will result in feeling, remaining confined to it. Also, whatever he produces or fabricates will result in perception, sannyas, remaining confined to it. Also, whatever he produces or fabricates will result in habitual drives and tendencies, sankharas, remaining confined to them. Also, whatever he produces or fabricates will result in consciousness, remaining confined to it. So he's just going to be, beam me up, Scotty, for all those who know Star Trek. You're just going to be zapping yourself through the 31 layers of existence. Now, what do you think, bhikkhus? Would you say that form is permanent or impermanent? And this is the formula that we've seen with, one that comes to mind, Nandaka Sutta, if you remember, where Venerable Nandaka was teaching the bhikkhunis. And it only took him 2 occasions, 2 Dhamma desanas, for them to turn noble, to become arahants, anagamins, sakadagamins, and sotapannas. 2 Dhamma desanas. So he gave them this formula. So it might seem familiar to some of you. So he just asked, is form or rupa permanent or impermanent? It is impermanent, Bhante. It is anicca, basically. And that which is impermanent, is it considered to be suffering or happiness? It is considered to be suffering, Bhante. So anicca cannot be without dukkha. Okay? It doesn't function separately. They're part and parcel of each other, these characteristics of existence. So with what is impermanent, suffering, and thus unreliable in its changing nature, is it suitable for you to look upon it or claim it as, this is mine, this is who I am, this is myself? No, Bhante, it is not suitable. Now, what do you think, bhikkhus? Would you say feeling is permanent or impermanent? It is impermanent, Bhante. And that which is impermanent, is it considered to be suffering or happiness? It is considered to be suffering, Bhante. So with what is impermanent, suffering, and thus unreliable in its changing nature, is it suitable for you to look upon it or claim it as, this is mine, this is who I am, this is myself? No, Bhante, it is not suitable. So feelings too. Do you know of any feeling you've had where it stayed for an hour, for a minute, full minute, unchanging? I don't think so. It might seem like it has been ages that you've had, or you've been having the same feeling for ages. But it's just, you remember the animation, moving picture show? It's just the sannyas trying to convince you otherwise. That's not true, because it's changing all the time, because you have the six senses. The six senses are bringing you different information. But sati, if it's there, it will detect the fact that feeling is impermanent. So now what do you think, bhikkhus? Would you say perception or memory is permanent or impermanent? It is impermanent, Bhante. And that which is impermanent, is it considered to be suffering or happiness? It is considered to be suffering, Bhante. So with what is impermanent, suffering, and thus unreliable in its changing nature, is it suitable for you to look upon it or claim it as, this is mine, this is who I am, this is myself? No, Bhante, it is not suitable. So that was Sanya. Sanyas are the perfect example of changeability, transitoriness, not staying the same, not being fixed. Remember, one of the vipallasas, the distortions of the mind, is that we look for fixedness. We look for stationariness, if you will. I don't know if I tried to create a new word, but we look for permanency in something that is impermanent. Even a rock is changing, you know. A rock in the middle of nowhere in the Mojave Desert, it's changing. The wind is coming at it, the sun, erosion, weathering, gravity, all these things. It's molecules, atoms, electrons, quarks, all these things working. If you want to look at the, quantum level. But the mind itself, remember the moving picture show, there's a reason for that. The Lord Buddha to be using it. Things are changing, so stop taking yourself so seriously as being framed in this as a role. I am a husband, I am a teacher, I am I don't know, an accountant, I am a this, I am angry, you did this to me. Concepts. That's what we end up proliferating. Remember from the Madhupindika Sutta, Honeyball discourse. What we constantly think about, concepts, what we think about, what they turn into papanchas, proliferations of concepts, nonstop. And then you're going down a rabbit hole, you're spiraling downward, nonstop, uncontrollably. Panic sets in, depression sets in, hopelessness and helplessness sets in. Now, what do you think, bhikkhus? Would you say habitual drives, sankharas, are permanent or impermanent? They are impermanent, Bhante. And that which is impermanent, is it considered to be suffering or happiness? It is considered to be suffering, Bhante. So with what is impermanent, suffering, and thus unreliable in its changing nature, is it suitable for you to look upon it or claim it as, this is mine, this is who I am, this is myself? No, Bhante, it is not suitable. Now, what do you think, bhikkhus? Would you say consciousness or sense awareness is permanent or impermanent? It is impermanent, Bhante. And that which is impermanent, is it considered to be suffering or happiness? It is considered to be suffering, Bhante. So with what is impermanent, suffering, and thus unreliable in its changing nature, is it suitable for you to look upon it or claim it as, this is mine, this is who I am, this is myself? No, Bhante, it is not suitable. Exactly, bhikkhus. Such a person, one who is able to practice in this manner, is declared as. So the person who sees the impermanence of these, the fact that these are sources of suffering themselves, is a person, Lord Buddha says, who fits these declarations. They address him, basically. A true noble disciple who continues to take apart as he dismantles and keeps letting go of all assets instead of trying to accumulate anything. Assets is a wonderful term that is used in Pali. It's upadhi. They come in the form of anything like memories. So sannyas could be one. Attainments, your hang-ups, identifications, whether it's related to the Dhamma or not. The Dhamma itself, if you're holding on to it, becomes an asset. So it's like you trying to squeeze yourself out of a hole to escape sangsara, but you're attached to these boulders and things behind you, chained up to them. Hence, we need letting go, relinquishment. This noble disciple in training is a person who is letting go of all assets, Lord Buddha says. Second, he's also a true noble disciple who keeps relinquishing and leaves them all behind instead of piling things up. C, a true noble disciple who keeps scattering and smoking them all out. D, a true noble disciple who extinguishes and does not rekindle. So now Lord Buddha is going to open each of these up. And what is it that he continues to take apart as he dismantles and keeps letting go of all assets instead of trying to accumulate anything? He continues to take apart forms and appearances as he dismantles each and every one of them and keeps letting go of all assets pertaining to forms instead of trying to accumulate anything pertaining to form. So whatever he's seeing, whatever he's, again, it's not just a seeing here. He's talking about the five aggregates. So it could be also whatever he's smelling, he's tasting, he's sensing. All these fall in the category of rupa. Remember that, please. He continues to take apart feelings as he dismantles each and every one of them and keeps letting go of all assets pertaining to feelings instead of trying to accumulate anything pertaining to feelings. So he sees feelings as that moving picture show, the frames. Boom, 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 different scene, different scene, different scene. It's changing. So you're not trying to nail the feeling down like that image that you've probably seen of a man who's got a hammer and some nails and he's at the beach and he's trying to nail the waves down to the sand. Such a poignant picture. A man who's leaning down and trying to nail the tide, the wave coming into the shore, to the sand with his hammer and nail. That's what we're trying to do with these. The Putujjana, that's what he's trying to do. He continues to take apart perceptions and memories as he dismantles each and every one of them and keeps letting go of all assets pertaining to perceptions and memories, instead of trying to accumulate anything pertaining to memories and perceptions. He continues to take apart habitual drives as he dismantles each and every one of them and keeps letting go of all assets pertaining to habitual drives, instead of trying to accumulate anything pertaining to habitual drives. When you do something, when you feel something, when you process things in a certain way, instead of saying, well, sorry, this is my personality, what you essentially are saying, these are my sankharas. But what Lord Buddha is saying, but yeah, there was a time when these didn't exist, and they don't exist all the time. They come and go. So stop taking them as me, my sankhara, unchanging. There's no such thing. He continues to take apart consciousness or sense awareness as he dismantles each and every one of them and keeps letting go of all assets pertaining to consciousness, instead of trying to accumulate anything pertaining to consciousness. Because it's never going to be just one vijnana coming through the six sense doors. Something captivated you by looking at it. Well, you're not going to be constantly looking at it and seeing it. So it's not going to be the dominance of the I consciousness. No, because guess what's set in? Manovinyana is taken over. even though you're still looking in that direction, but the mind consciousness has taken over. It's been already several minutes. You're dwelling in mano vijnana land. You're lost in thoughts, concepts, possibilities, sannyas. So that's the other consciousness. So it's changing. It's like hot potato being tossed from one to the next of the six sense doors. So there is not a consciousness that is permanent. So just use them for what they are to make life possible, but nothing more. He keeps relinquishing and leaving behind forms and appearances instead of piling them up or clinging to them. He keeps relinquishing and leaving behind feelings instead of piling them up or clinging to them. So he just feels the feeling because it's a feeling that needs to be felt because you have nama rupa. That's it. He keeps relinquishing and leaving behind perceptions and memories instead of piling them up or clinging to them. Lord Buddha had memories. He had, the sannyas would come, obviously, but he was not their slave anymore. He would have feelings, of course. People think that he was beyond that. No, well, he was, but he wasn't either, because he was experiencing life as a normal human being would. So when he tasted milk rice, he tasted milk rice. He knew something that was delicious from something that was abhorring, that was disgusting. He knew one dish that had enough salt in it, the other one that was completely without any. So people have removed the humanity of Lord Buddha or the Arahants, made it into this, I don't know, some other type of experience that is so disassociated from our understanding of life, comprehension of such a possibility. So the aggregates as such, they are there to be experienced, but seen for what they are through the characteristics, the three characteristics of existence, anicca, dukkha, and anatta. They don't have a substantiality, a fixedness, a permanency to them. He keeps relinquishing and leaving behind habitual drives instead of piling them up or clinging to them. He keeps relinquishing and leaving behind consciousnesses instead of piling them up or clinging to them. And what is it that he keeps scattering and smoking all out? He keeps scattering and smoking out all forms and appearances. He keeps scattering and smoking out all feelings. He keeps scattering and smoking out all perceptions and memories. He keeps scattering and smoking out all habitual drives. He keeps scattering and smoking out all consciousnesses. By the way, these are terms that people would use in the case of, let's say, bees or a dwelling place that's infested with some pests, or like in the, bats have moved in. So you need to smoke the animals out, okay? Or sometimes bandits. So these are terms that people would use. So Lord Buddha is using them in terms of in reference to the five aggregates. And what is it that he extinguishes and does not rekindle again? He extinguishes all forms and appearances and does not rekindle them again. He extinguishes all feelings and does not rekindle them again. This is when the Arahant has reached, well, he's become an Arahant. He extinguishes all perceptions and memories and does not rekindle them again. However, this doesn't necessarily only mean that this happens then only when the person is now an Arahant. You're doing this moment to prepare. Arahantship is not something that just happens out of the blue without you having done the preparatory work. Anupubba patipada. It's a gradual training. So you're doing this extinguishing bit all the time. So when sanya happens, memories show up. You see it as a memory. It's impermanent. And it's because of that, it's suffering. If you cling to it, so you drop it, you just extinguish that sanya. And the next one, and the next one, and the next one. That's why you need to have sati all the time. He extinguishes all sangsara, habitual drives, and does not rekindle them. He extinguishes all consciousnesses and does not rekindle them again. Thus, through seeing all this, the noble disciple experiences disenchantment towards all forms and appearances, towards all feelings, towards all perceptions and memories, towards all habitual drives, and towards all consciousnesses. Furthermore, by becoming dispassionate and allowing the fading away of his old attachments to things, he is finally released. On being released thus, he knows for certain in his heart, it is fully liberated. Thus, that bhikkhu comes to know directly, while understanding with absolute certainty. Destroyed is birth. The holy life has been fully lived. What had to be completed has now been completed. There is no more rebirth into any state of becoming. Sad, sad, sad. Very much to the point type of a sutta. And I appreciate Lord Buddha's conciseness and his incredible skill at using similes, even ones that we can relate to today, like the moving picture show. I'll pause here if there are any questions or comments that you might have. Remember, the khandhas are transitory ingredients. They are not there for us to see as a glued thing. You know, when I was a child, I used to, or especially when I was a teenager, actually, like, well, 11, 12, I used to save up money and would go to the place, a bookstore, I guess. They would sell also stationaries and things, but they would also sometimes carry, in the middle of the war in Lebanon, so it was a big, treat for us if we found it, boxes where we had to put these 3D models together, like ships and planes, and sometimes they would have such small pieces. So, and then other times you would buy one and you think that it's one of those you have to assemble, but then I would hold it, and to my absolute surprise, dismay, and horror, I would see that it's already assembled. It's not disassembled. It's a one piece. Well, what am I going to do with this one piece? The whole journey was like for me to put it together. That didn't come with ingredients. That came as a one piece. So we are looking at these five aggregates and thinking that it is a one piece, treating it as a one piece, but it's not a one piece. But that's what the avidya does. The ignorance is telling us, yes, the illusion and the false reliability that these things are fixed. Meanwhile, they are leaning against each other for support to give us the semblance that there is this thing called a person, giving the impression that it is a whole unit, if you will. On the other hand, you have Lord Buddha on his night of awakening. He saw the three characteristics of existence. He said, no, there's nothing whole here. The whole thing has so many holes in it, if you will. It's completely a sham. It's anicca, it's dukkha, it's anatta. There's nothing substantial about it. It doesn't have a leg to stand on. Even if it had three, it can't even stand on them. And the whole thing fell apart. So the aggregates themselves, individually, they can't do anything. They are joining forces. They tag team, basically, to keep us in illusion. And the way we are kept in this delusional state is because of the presence of ayoniso manasikara, unwise attention, or as others might call, non-radical attention, unhealthy attention, wrong attention. Sati is simply trying to bring the attention back to where it belongs. And that's why it's a full-time job. So sati cannot take a time off. You cannot put sati or mindfulness on the shelf and say, I'll come back to you once the long weekend is over. I got to take care of things. You know, the guys are here, they're fixing the ground or the garden. I need to attend to this. Or I just have this major project. I have to write this email. Could please, Sati, could you go do something over there in the kitchen? Leave me alone for 5 minutes. No, it doesn't work like that. The Dhamma should not take a time out. Because what that means is you are taking time out from the possibility of wisdom and stepping back into the world of delusion, world of avidya. That's what we're doing when we step away from sati. So we are simply gaining if we invest in sati by putting the attention where it needs to be, which is at the point of contact, the way it is happening without adding any flares to it, any added textures coming from the defiled heart, whether it's passions, lust, or greed, whether it's hatred, resentment, or whether it is just moha, delusion. So I will stop here. Any questions come up? No? Okay. So let us transfer some breath. Akasatha chabumata devanaga mahindika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakhantu loka sasanam. Akasatha chabumata devanaga mahindika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakhantu desanam. Akasatha chabumata devanaga mahindika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakhantu mam parati. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. It's a rare opportunity to be exposing ourselves to the Dhamma, having access to the Dhamma, living at a time where the Dhamma still exists. But that's still passive. Work must be done, and no one can do the work that each of us has to do for ourselves. Otherwise, samsara doesn't make a difference for samsara. It says, hey, come on along. You've been doing this for countless eons. Let's carry on. It's a rebellious act, what Lord Buddha did. It is a rebellious act, what we're trying to do here. We're not here to collect data. We're not trying to collect information, references to suttas, and that's it. No. We're trying to release ourselves. That's what it is. Nibbana is a release from suffering. Not just this suffering, not burning your finger, but suffering from becoming decapitated, watching our loved ones be put to death again and again, again and again, and not being able to do anything, especially when death comes around, when old age comes around, when sickness comes around, and doing this incalculably. Unfortunately, we don't have the ability that Lord Buddha had to see the countless eons of birth, death, birth, death, birth, death. But we don't have to either. We can just look at our own daily life and see how many different experiences we've had. And each of them was born, each of them died. Born, died, born, died, born, died. And that is what's happening on a macro level in a life, this life, like the many lives behind us. So let's put an end to that, Lord Buddha encouraged us, so that you can't stop it from going beyond and continue on that foolish journey of a putujanas. So I wish that upon all of you. And may you and your loved ones be protected through the purity and virtue of your own keeping of sila in your heart, where you become a source of refuge and an island of protection yourselves. And the world around you will feel it, and you will feel it, and that will change you. That is the first purification. It is undeniable in its power. You want to grow in your Dhamma, you practice sila and take it deep into your DNA. Make it part of your life. And the Dhamma will be so palatable everywhere you go. Sati will be with you without you trying. And it will unfold. It will unfold. The Dhamma is not so difficult to attain. But we need to be genuine in our efforts. Make use of this life. It's precious. And may the Triple Gems blessings be with you, and all the rewards to be gained from us, all of us sitting here and listening and paying attention and trying to take it in. All those be shared with Devas, Nagas, Bhutas, Yakas, Gandhabas, Garudas, Brahmas, especially the Petas, loved ones, ancestors, friends and family, and our teachers. All. Sukhiyot.